Okay, so today's live stream, the 3rd of October 2022. It's 5:36 p.m. British Standard Time. So, as always, so just stand by, see if anyone tunes in, logs in, and go from there. These live streams are always spontaneous, so I don't really have any subjects prepared per se. See how it goes, and I'm going to multitask until someone logs in. Got my newspaper. Just going to read this. Hey, Carl, welcome. That was quick. Thought I would have to stand by. How are you? So as always, Carl, I'll see if we get a bit of traction, see if we could get a few more people logging in. That's good. I've had an uneventful day, just bought some newspapers earlier because I don't know if you heard about the disaster in Indonesia, the football stadium disaster, but I wanted to get some coverage of that. I believe it's the worst in the world since 1964, the Estadio Nacional disaster in Lima. So I wanted to get a bit of coverage of that. Have you had a busy day, Carl? Yeah, it looks like tear gas was an issue. So apparently, this Indonesian league isn't FIFA isn't in charge of that, but so tear gas is banned by FIFA, or at least FIFA recommends against it. But they apparently there was some crowd trouble, there was a pitch invasion, and then the tear gas was used. But I hope there's a big investigation into this. Yeah, my mum was actually working on wallpaper as well, but she was painting right over it rather than removing it. I think wallpaper could be quite messy. When I first moved to this house, my bedroom was just painted. The walls were directly painted. If I had my own place, like really my own place, I would probably opt for painted walls as opposed to wallpaper. I think wallpaper can be quite messy. So yeah, I hope you got that done. So, like I say, Carl, just see if a few more people log in because really, for these live streams to work effectively, I think it's I'm the one who cleans up the wallpaper. Yeah, is it? Was that one room, or were you doing like? Was it the whole house? Was there a lot of work to do? Welcome. I see someone else is logged in. So, and someone else. Hello, Warren. Welcome. How's things in Dudley today? Me and Carl were just talking about our days so far. The whole house. So you're just tired of the wallpaper, or is that something that had to be done, or why does your mum want to do that? Is it just a general change, or in the case of this house, my parents will be moving back here next year, so there's just still a lot of stuff to be done. I've kind of been maintaining the place. I'm in this room. I'll just give you guys a quick scan around. As you can see, it's kind of walls, alabaster walls. I guess alabaster. It looks good though, and it's quite an old house, 120 years old. So I don't know if it's a listed building, but we actually there's some bylaws here about what you could do to old buildings. Mm. Yeah, I haven't worked myself for wallpaper for a long time. I guess you need something that sort of cements it onto the wall. I don't know if it's paint or what. Here in Sunderland, talking about well, we weren't talking about this, but weather-wise, it was horrible weather the other day, just grey and wet and bleak. Actually, October's been a little bit better so far. The first 3 days of October, it's chilly enough, but it's grey at least up here. How about you guys? So we have Belfast and Dudley. Has it been wet? Has it been? What's the situation? Tara, welcome. I haven't seen you in the live stream before, I don't think. Apologies if you have, but old houses are nice. I hate what they are doing with architecture today, all bricks and angular buildings. Do you have an interest in architecture, Tara? I do. In Sunderland actually, talking of architecture, our old civic centre is in 1970s brutalist sort of building. It's quite ugly, but they're demolishing it and we're moving everything into a new city hall. God, Glen excuse me. I thought you were in Belfast directly, but yeah. So the centre in Sunderland, it's been basically gutted out. Almost can't breathe in my city. Where are you, Tara? Are you in a bigger city, or I assume you're in the UK? What city are you in? Yeah, I think the thing with architecture, I mean, I'm no expert, but purely from personal taste, it's all about aesthetic balance. So, if you have, for example, New Delhi, excuse me, um, yeah, I have a big interest in cities, and I know in the case of, well, of course, with New Delhi, you have New Delhi and then Delhi, and I think often people outside there's a misconception with this because New Delhi itself isn't that big, but Delhi, that is Indian capital territory, the whole area around there obviously is huge. Yeah, I've heard about controversy around like Noda. I think the city is called Noda, New Noda. I might be getting that wrong. Gurgaon and those cities around Delhi. Um, but I know there's a lot of modernist architecture going up there. And obviously, Delhi is an ancient city. Noida, excuse me, Noida. Yeah. I know there's a lot of developments in Noida. And there's even New Noida. I think Mumbai has something similar. There's a new city development near there. That's it. NCR. Hello, Declan. Welcome. Um, I imagine. I mean, London's the same. When you have ancient, it's fine if it's like a newer city where you have more modernist building to start off with. But an ancient city like Delhi, London, Beijing, those sort of cities, when you get drastic changes, it's always going to be controversial. But then again, cities change their face over time, and especially a mega city like Delhi, there's going to be old and new, I imagine. Um, Sorry, just going back a bit. Aaron, we had a bit of rain and cloud, but with some sun. Let's see. Um, yeah, yeah, I find demographic cities fascinating. I haven't made the video about it yet. I've been trying to get around to this, but for about a year, I'd done this comprehensive study on world cities, mega cities. So I find it a very interesting subject. Are you in New Delhi, Tara, or are you more in the capital territory? Capital region, excuse me. Your brother's in London, and it's the same there. Yeah. This is the thing. I mean, I don't think you can have a totally static where you just maintain old buildings and there's nothing new. I mean, in London, when the Shard went up, which is one of Britain's only true skyscrapers, there isn't many skyscrapers in this country, but it's one of the only true ones. It was controversial, but I think it was. I've been to the top of the Shard, and it was magnificent. But it's always even in my city, which is not it's not London, it's not Delhi, it's a much, much smaller city. We have one of the oldest churches in the UK. It's a Saxon building dating from the 7th century, but we have 1960s tower blocks in the background, and it makes quite an interesting juxtaposition. I find that I think you can have modernist buildings, but if it's done in a way that's balanced and it isn't ruining the aesthetics of the ancient part of the city. Um, I mean, I can definitely understand controversy if you have an ancient temple or an ancient building and you have a big skyscraper jutting up beside it. It's that would definitely ruin the aesthetics. I think in Paris, what they do there is they have the skyscrapers in the La Défense district outside the city. American cities is unusual because you have colonial era buildings. It's kind of like you'll have the city hall, and then you'll have all these skyscrapers of the downtown district. You see this in places like Indianapolis and Pittsburgh. It's quite unusual if you see the panorama. Buildings from Georgian and Victorian look a lot better than modern buildings. My taste in architecture is quite eclectic. It's a bit like music. I certainly love Georgian buildings. Those, I mean, city like Bristol, Newcastle has some beautiful buildings. But I think it depends on the modern building because they're not all the same. There's a lot of variation there, so it really does depend. Um, Actually, one problem that's seeing the old architecture is the neglect and lack of planning, especially here. So is that a situation where you have investment and you have these projects that are put forward and then they're kind of abandoned halfway through? I know that's an issue in China. When I was in China, there's buildings going up all the time. It's like, and I remember in the city that I was in, it wasn't a very big city, but I remember asking one of my students, "What are these buildings for? Is that for residence or is it business?" And they said they're all empty. And this was like, they were like ghost buildings. So they were high rise buildings, but they were all completely empty. And yet they'd already been built several years before. So it might well be that you have actually over ambition. That could be an issue. Um, and then, I mean, I'm not so familiar with the business side of it, but this seems to be a phenomenon that's happening in various countries. Well, you do have a point there with new buildings. Yeah, I mean, I really think it depends. There's some modern architecture and modern art is horrendous. Um, of course, it comes down to personal taste. I certainly don't think a city should remain static forever. Old cities, and sometimes you get a good balance. I mean, Bristol, for example. Bristol is a good example of a city that has a range of architecture. You have Bristol's actually a pretty old city. It has some Roman foundations, like a lot of British cities. Retains some medieval buildings, but most of the architecture is Georgian. Yet they still manage to have modern office blocks and architecture. Newcastle's something similar. I mean, Newcastle's an ancient city. Newcastle has Roman foundations, but they've just put up a new, big, fancy new office block. But it doesn't look ugly. It fits well into the city because it's not a skyscraper. It's not ridiculous. It's not like looming above the city. And Newcastle's a medium-sized city. It's not massive. So um, I think a lot of this is about getting an aesthetic balance. Um, Honestly, I think any new project is going to attract controversy, and sometimes it's very notorious. When Brasilia was built in Brazil, that was as the new capital in the 1960s. That was very controversial. Islamabad in Pakistan, similar thing. And some countries now are moving their capitals because the respective megacities. I know in Indonesia, Jakarta, it's just exploded in population. So the Indonesian government's moving it to Borneo. I don't know if that would happen in India, if there would be any plans in the future, Tara, for New Delhi to move to somewhere else because of just the capital region is just such a big population. I believe there's 30 million plus in that agglomeration. So it's one of the biggest in the world. So I don't know if there would be plans in the future, maybe for that reason. Um, yeah, I can imagine that. I wouldn't either if I lived in Delhi, but I'm just wondering if the Indian government, if they've, because I know the Indonesian government did for that reason, because of the exploding population. Aaron, I personally can't stand the brutalist style. I think Gothic revival, neoclassical, and Art Deco buildings generally go well together. Yeah, I agree with that. Sunderland, actually, we have some decent Art Deco buildings, and people walk past them oblivious. In Fawcett Street, which is kind of our main thoroughfare, there's some really nice 1930s buildings. There's something called the Elephant Tea Rooms. And Sunderland's not a cosmopolitan city by any means, but we do have some good architecture. In London, there's the Daily Express building, 1930s Art Deco building. That's really impressive. But again, this is all with what goes well together. The thing about brutalism, my understanding of it is it was never designed to be aesthetically pleasing. It was designed to be sustainable. But yeah, some of those brutalist 60s and 70s buildings are pretty ugly. A famous example of this, of course, is Euston train station in London. But Sunderland Civic Centre is a good example. It's just a big concrete slab. It's a pretty ugly building. Our new city hall is quite nice. It's modern, but it just looks nicer. Um, but I know on Facebook there's a brutalism appreciation club. So Actually, on the subject of architecture, just show you something. It's actually beautiful, but I don't think governments would do so because the geopolitical and historical importance of Delhi is magnificent. Yeah, that's the thing in the case of Delhi. I mean, it's always been politically important in India. Even in the Raj, it was important. So I think that to change that would be disregarding that history. I'm just going to show you people the. If you just bear with me 1 minute, I have a book on architecture. Now, I should emphasize by no means am I an expert or a student of this, but I find it interesting. This is a like a coffee table book I got a few years ago, Modern World Architecture. It says modern, but that's spanning quite a long time. I mean, there's stuff like, let's see, um, Kalman House, Ticino, Switzerland. So something like that, that's 1976. It's quite, a lot of people would say it just looks like a shit. Look at this. Ministry of Highways, this is in Tbilisi, Georgia, 1974. And that's pure brutalism. There's a housing estate somewhere in London. It looks like all these Lego bricks in a row. Um, I agree with you, Aaron. I think some of the Georgian Regency architecture is beautiful. And the thing is, it's sustainable. The Victorians and Georgians actually were, uh, they knew what was sustainable. Then again, they also had a lot of imitation because we have something in Sunderland, I guess we call it a folly, Penshaw Monument. Now, people looking in around the world might look at that and think that's a Roman monument. Whoa. But actually, it's only 1846. It was done in the Roman style. It's impressive, but it's kind of a cheat because it's not that old. It's not ancient. It's Victorian. I was googling at some of those pictures. Yeah, let's see. There's many more. The Alton West Estate, Roehampton, Surrey. This is 1959. Actually, there's something. There's a development in Sheffield, a bit like that as well. I remember reading King Charles remarking about the old brutalist Birmingham Central Library building that looked more like a place that you'd that you'd incinerate books and where you'd keep them. Yeah, I know the king is very interested in architecture. He even developed something called Poundbury in Dorset, which was kind of this, of course, was when he was Prince of Wales. He won't be able to intervene so much now, but I know the king has an appreciation for older architecture. I'm trying to find something that would maybe. So let's see. Some of the pictures aren't the best. It doesn't give the best angle. Canary Wharf, 1991. This was Britain's tallest building until the Shard. Um, that's not too bad. It's quite like I don't think it stands out. It was a pretty tall building. I remember being next to that. The Lloyd's building. This is pretty famous. 1986. That reminds me of the Pompidou Museum in Paris. Well, a little bit. The Pompidou Museum was kind of inside out. It looked like a museum that was inside out. Let's see what else do we have here. Henny House, Utrecht in the Netherlands, 1919. So it's quite old. Now that to me looks kind of bleak. It looks, I don't know. Uh, But of course, sometimes pragmatism is favoured over aesthetics because I just read the Royal Train, the current Royal Train, which isn't used that much. It's clean, it's fancy, but it isn't actually resplendent. It's not absolutely coming down with adoration the way the old Victorian train was. I read about this yesterday. I mean, it's practical, it's clean, and there's the utilities there for the monarch to use, but it isn't. It's nothing special. I mean, it's not what you would expect for a head of state to be traveling in necessarily. Um, Update suspects who attacked me enter their plea in court on Friday. I've actually updated Declan. This Friday, so that's not long to wait, less than a week. Have you been given it? I suppose you've no way to know, but do you think they're going to fess up? Do you think they're going to admit it, or do you think they're going to stall the process? Because I imagine, what I know of the justice system, if they plead guilty, that will probably be a recipe for leniency, but which is not good for you. But on the other hand, it means that the process is sped up a bit. At least you won't have to keep making appearances, and at least it won't drag out for you. Um, Probably their lawyers will be advising them to plead guilty. That's usually the case. And going to do some more wallpaper removal with my mum. Okay, well, good luck with that, Carl, and thanks for coming in. Royal Shakespeare Theatre, Liverpool. Now this is 2011. This isn't the old Globe Theatre. That one's interesting because it's 2011, but it doesn't look like 2011. There's buildings in the Gulf states. Actually, I think there's one in Saudi Arabia. It's one of the tallest buildings in the world, and it's kind of concrete, and it looks like it could be an ancient building, but it's not. It's 2010s, and it's got this big clock face on it. I forget what it's called, but it's a very very tall building, like a super tall building. Yeah, it doesn't look like a super tall building. This, of course, is the notorious O2, well, then Millennium Dome. I think they will most likely plead guilty, but we will see. In a way, I hope they do. I mean, I know it means a more lenient sentence, but I'm just thinking in terms of the problem is if they don't plead guilty, it makes things harder for you, Declan, because you'll have to, I assume, make more appearances, and it will just drag out the process. I imagine at this point you just want the whole thing to be over and done with. I mean, obviously, I imagine you want justice, but um, Declan, if you don't mind, I'm just going to give a little explainer here for the benefit of other people. Just Declan was. Do you mind, Declan, if I explain what we're talking about, just for reference, because people might be confused what we're referring to. While I'm waiting for your reply, RJ Flores, Westminster Cathedral in London is only 120 years old, but when you're inside, it seems older. It seems and looks a lot older. So I always get this mixed up. I think Westminster Cathedral is the Catholic cathedral, whereas Westminster Abbey is the abbey. Um, yeah, I mean Liverpool. That's a good example. I do indeed want it over with, and yes, don't mind you explaining. So just for the benefit of other people, if you don't know, Declan unfortunately was assaulted as he was. Just tell me if I'm getting this wrong, Declan. But as he was walking home one evening, this couple they asked you for cigarettes, Declan, and yeah, they punched him. So this is an ongoing case, and Declan's been open about it. Because one thing I talk about a lot on my channel is crime, and Declan's been through this, so that's what we're discussing. That this case is ongoing, and his assailants are facing trial soon. So excuse me, walking to work and asking for coke and money. Yeah, scumbags. I just hope that the process is. Have you been given any sort of liaison? I mean, I know you mentioned that the police in your case were quite sympathetic, but do you have like a liaison officer that sort of gives you an update for what's been happening? Yeah, I agree, Tara. I mean, in this country, we've enormous frustration with our justice system because one problem now, I have to say, though, is there's a barrister strike going on. And that generally, I mean, COVID slowed down the whole world, so there's a backlog actually of legal cases going on. I've noticed just reading the papers that a lot of cases have been reverted to this month. Like I keep hearing about sentencing will be in October. Well, we're in October now, so we're probably going to see a lot of cases finalized this month. We had a particularly horrendous case near my city, well, two actually. One of them, it's depressing to even mention, but a young lad was walking home, minding his own business, and a group of teenagers out for trouble. They basically they chased him down an alley. One of them killed him with a knife, but they beat him up first. And it was so grim, so depressing. This was like a pack of animals, you know, surrounding the victim. Anyway, they got done for what's seen as joint enterprise, a joint enterprise law, which is that although only one of them actually killed him, the others were seen as jointly culpable because they were part of the gang. I personally hope they're thrown away because to me it's one of the most evil crimes possible. Another incident also up here in the northeast of England, young father was killed by a teenage gang because they were mouthing off at him and he remonstrated. And I just think there's something very sinister out there when you have teenagers who are prepared to attack strangers. And I know India, Tara, I've heard in India the process just stalls out for years and years. So you get victims of crime basically are going up against a system that's stalled out forever. In India, is it that you mentioned the justice system is rigged? Is this like corruption in the sense of maybe judges being paid off, or is that the perception? I mean, or is it? Why do you think it is that the system, like, why does it take so long to get justice there? Is it from the court side of things? That is to say, is there a shortage of judges, or what's going on? Or is it that organized criminals are paying judges off? What do you think the problem is? RJ, luckily these scumbags are only 0.1% of the population who attack random people, but we have all encountered them in our life. I've been jumped for no reason before myself in Manchester as a teen. This is the thing. I mean, in terms of statistically actually happening, Britain's a fairly safe country. I mean, I was last a victim of crime in 7 years ago when my bike was stolen. I've had a few incidents with teenagers mouthing off to me. It never escalated, but I can imagine it could have done with the sort of stories that you hear. I mean, I'm a 37-year-old man and I can handle myself one on one, maybe even one on two. But the problem is, no one can take on a gang, and it's scary. It's frankly scary that this happens. But you're right that these actual cases are probably, even among the criminal world, it's probably a minority. Unfortunately, when it happens, it puts fear into society. And I think with our soft justice system, there's no deterrent. Especially, I actually sent a message to the Ministry of Justice recently about the issue of young offenders. And because my sister, a few years back, she was attacked with her pregnant friend. They were in their early 20s at the time, and the police at the time said if they defended themselves, they would have been done for actually defending themselves from this gang of teenagers. So I made this point not about that specific case, but I made this point about self-defense. And the Ministry of Justice, their response, it was detailed, but it was very evasive. It was very, well, we have long-standing legal defense in the United Kingdom about self-defense, but blah. The response was just, it was like a lawyer's answer. It was very, wasn't really direct. So I wasn't overly impressed by that. But anyway, I also think it was dishonest because if an adult defends himself from a young offender, the adult will be done. That's obscene, absolutely obscene. So I do think we need much tougher penalties, just particularly for young offenders. At the moment, there is none. I read a case the other day. A young woman, well, I guess she wasn't a young offender; she was 21, but she threatened a railway conductor with a knife. 59 previous convictions. 59 previous convictions. She got a suspended sentence and she had to pay £250 to the victim. But where's the deterrent there? I mean, okay, the victim's £250 better off, but this was basically threatening to stab someone. And she has 59 previous convictions. Now, to me, if I was a judge looking at that, I would think this person is not learning from community sentencing or whatever it is they're giving her. That needs to be a custodial sentence. She needs shock treatment. Give her a custodial sentence. Okay. Corruption runs deep. First problem is lack of personnel. So that's actually lack of numbers. Um, Even if it's petty theft, I think laws and procedures are too lengthy and loopholes in the law are easily exploited. Well, it's a general case for any country. Yeah, and of course, when you have a country as big as India with over 1 billion people, I imagine that the bureaucracy is going to be even deeper because I imagine in any jurisdiction, particularly in big cities like Delhi and Mumbai, you're going to have thousands of cases to process. So it may be that the system is genuinely under pressure, but I do have enormous sympathy for victims of crime, well, anywhere, but particularly in a situation where they're waiting for justice, and particularly when you have more serious crimes that you mentioned, Tara, shoplifting, but more serious crimes like rape, murder. I mean, for that process to be prolonged, it might be. I've heard it could be as long as 10 years, which is staggering. Um, yeah, 59 previous offences. I'm not sure if I could find the article. I might, if you give me a minute, I might be able to find the article. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get around to everyone's comments. Declan, drugs, alcohol, and drill music, as well as a soft justice system, seems to be a factor with these issues in the country. Yeah, absolutely. Drill music is poison. People who say it's harmless obviously don't understand it. I think it's poison. RJ, I live in Philadelphia for a couple of years when I was in my early 20s as a family over there. That was a very rough city, way worse for violence than any city in the UK. Yeah, well, most American cities are. I visited Baltimore back in 1999. It was the only big American city we were in. It was only one day visit, so not long enough to really say anything. But even worse than Chicago and LA. Well, I was going to say Los Angeles and New York City have actually got better since the early 90s. Worse than Chicago, I'm surprised by that. I thought Chicago had higher homicide rates than Philadelphia. Interestingly, though, in the United States, it's sometimes the smaller or medium sized cities that are the worst. It's not necessarily New York City, Los Angeles, places like St. Louis, New Orleans, Baltimore. They're not massive cities, but they have staggeringly high crime levels. Um, yeah, the system's under pressure. Um, I'll see if I can find this article. Just bear with me, people. I'll just be a minute. RJ, are you American, or you mentioned you've got family there? Um, but yeah, you if you did you ever have problems in Philadelphia directly? Were you attacked? Did anything happen to you? St. Louis is definitely the most violent. Yeah, St. Louis has a very bad reputation. I'll just be a minute. It was either the Daily Mirror or I think it was the Metro actually. When it comes to self defence in the UK, the laws seem to be intentionally vague until there's public backlash over someone being prosecuted for self defence and the prosecution is stopped. Yeah, it's a joke. I mean, this is one of my biggest issues with the justice system. It is not transparent. Under Dominic Raab, some things improve. For example, there is now verdicts televised in some high profile cases at the Old Bailey. But that's only the most extreme cases. That's only for murder cases. And it's only the verdict. You try complaining about a judge in this country, a lenient judge, it's almost impossible. You might have the address of the court involved, but judges, there's no contact point, there's no email, there's no website. It's not like an MP. People complain about politicians, but at least we can vote them out of office. With with judges, it's one of my biggest issues. I mean, the American system, I wouldn't necessarily advocate it, but I think it's more transparent at least. People know who judges are. They're public figures and they can be elected. So this issue about transparent, here we go. This charming young lady, I'll hunt you down and kill you, Yob told rail conductor. So apparently she's a DJ in Liverpool, and yeah, each was ordered to pay Miss Stacey, that's the railway conductor, £250 and received a 16-week suspended prison sentence. Suspended sentence every time. Now, if I were a judge, I would look at her past conduct. One off, maybe you could think, okay, she lost her temper, she regrets it. 59 previous offences. This is a career criminal. And she's not even a young offender, she's 21. No, my mistake, 28. 28. She's an adult. I would throw the book at her. I'd definitely give her a custodial sentence. I think our justice system is definitely softer on violent women. I think that's part of it. But yeah, it's just a disgrace. I mean, the thing is, Tara, this happens all the time in the UK. So the frustration that's coming across with what I'm saying, it's echoed by a lot of people in this country. But you're right, Aaron. I remember the case of the farmer in Norfolk. It was quite a while back now, back in the 2000s. And he shot a burglar, and he was prosecuted. And then public outcry and freedom of the press. It shows how important this is. Highlighted his case, and then it was overturned. But it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be vague. I mean, I understand that we can't, for example, go over the top and absolutely brutalize a criminal. But I think if someone is, if you're alone in your house, especially vulnerable people, older people, disabled people, and you have someone invade that safe space, a burglar, you don't know if they're armed or not. Now, I think that a householder, homeowner, should be able to do basically what they can to feel safe, short of torturing the person. I don't say that flippantly, but in terms of the red lines, yeah, I think basically they should be allowed to, if they could tie them up, if they're physically able to do it, rough them up a bit in order to subdue them. But I know if I'd done that, I'd be charged with assault, even though it wouldn't be from. It would be to subdue the person. There's a lot that needs to change. And the Tories talk tough on crime, but this continues to happen on their watch. Let's see. RJ, I was born in America but grew up in Manchester, UK. Okay. Well, Manchester, of course, you'll know this is in the UK. It's a bit of a reputation as Moss Side, and but I think any British city isn't comparable. There was a brief period where London was surpassing New York City in crime rates, but that was brief. That's the only thing I would say about the UK situation. The problem is our soft justice system. In terms of safety, realistically speaking, we are still a relatively safe country. We have a very low homicide rate. We're near the bottom actually in global rankings. So there is that. I mean, we have about 1,000 homicides a year in a population of 68 million. So that's the only caution I would throw out there is that, yes, we need tougher penalties. Yes, these thugs need to be tackled, but um, we are relatively safe compared to if we look at Central American countries, they even make the United States look safe. I mean, countries like Honduras, El Salvador, very, very dangerous. Yeah, I heard gunfire regularly in Philly, but I wasn't the worst area, so it wasn't a nightly thing. I drove through the worst areas, but very rarely get out of the car in those neighborhoods. Don't blame you. Let's see. Ray, that was disgusting when the woman defaced the statue of faces in urine. Yeah, that incident's. Sorry for the language, but well, it's angered a lot of people. A lot. I mean, that's just sinking down you, though. In fact, I've just uploaded another video about that addressing the ideology of eco zealots, and I raised that one. She was arrested, and there were a number of officers involved. I think maybe partly for her own safety. I don't know about the states, Ray. I don't know if this is happening with eco zealots in the United States. I know there's other sorts of protests going on there, but in the UK, we've been dealing with this for 3 years now, and they're getting increasingly more outrageous. And it's a no-brainer how well, it's a no-brainer. I mean, how a statue of an elderly man who raised millions for charity has any connection to climate change. I don't understand the logic of these people. Um, I would have given her the harshest sentence possible. You're referring to the train incident, I assume, Declan. I would have as well. I would have I would have taken into account her 59 previous. These judges are idiots. I mean, I must admit, I get very frustrated with judges because they claim that their hands are tied. But in any legal case, you have aggravating and mitigating factors. Now, 59 previous offences is clearly an aggravating factor. So this judge is just it drives me crazy because me and you have almost no power on The public can write to the Attorney General and ask for a review of a disproportionately lenient case, but the chances of it overturning, it's infuriating. So that has to change. I think if judges were more accountable, if they were more scrutinized, they would issue more realistic sentences. Why are they doing it? It could be because they don't want to add to overcrowded prisons. I don't know. Maybe they are ideologically involved. Maybe I don't know what it is, but it's pathetic. RJ, more people have been convicted for fighting with the Kurds and Yazidis against ISIS than fighting for ISIS. Um, when they arrived back in the UK, the justice system needs to change. Yeah, it's clearly the level of public disillusion in our justice system, and it's probably not the worst in the world, but it's clear there is utter disillusion out there. If you were to do a vox pop on the street for just in a regular high street anywhere in the UK, do you think the justice system in this country is on the side of victims of crime or on the side of the law-abiding public? I think the majority would say no. Now, the sentencing council claim, oh, it's due to bad publicity, or they basically, if you look at their website, they blame misconceptions. It's very condescending the way they have this section on myths about this justice system. Judges are out of touch, and they address all these myths. But the thing is, there's empirical evidence that the system is soft. Tara, one day a burglar came to our house in broad daylight. Damn. We don't keep guns and those stuff for self-defense in India, and he slipped away as no one to get hold of him as he oiled his entire body. Damn. So I assumed he'd oiled his body for it. Had he come through a window, or if you don't mind me asking, Tara, how did he get in? Were the doors not locked, or did he get through a window, or did he get anything? I assume you had no CCTV either. I don't know if it's funny or scary at the same time. I must admit, it's a strange image. Like he oiled himself up. It's Ray. I've seen antisocial behaviour in UK. Something needs to be done about it. The Netherlands and France doesn't have this problem. That's interesting. I mean, French, from what I gather, French crime rates are similar to the UK, and apparently they're rising in urban areas. Interestingly, France in almost every international ranking is about similar to the UK. So what's interesting actually is Sweden, which has long been kind of heralded by the political left as this utopia. They've got rising violent crime levels. They've got rising gang problems, which is why they've just had populist right wing party elected. So I wouldn't say it's unique to the UK. However, I do think sort of antisocial behaviour in this yob culture is a particularly British problem. I mean, in other countries you have crime, and other countries might even be more dangerous than the UK. But there's this particular problem in the UK with antisocial behaviour with young offenders. I remember a case from Birmingham where the householder and his son tied up two burglars who were breaking in until the police arrived. A few days later, householder and his son were charged with kidnap. That's insane. I mean, I hope if that was a jury case, the jury absolutely threw it out. It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. Now, maybe the police were just doing their job, but it's. I think the police should turn a blind eye to that. If criminals are pressing charges, I think the police should say, "Nah, I didn't hear that. You're not pressing charges." Frankly, it's rotten. It's absolutely rotten. And then the Ministry of Justice is telling me that the public are allowed to defend themselves. Well, that's clearly BS. Luckily, the situation became public and the police dropped the charges. Here's the problem: it shouldn't have to be down to newspapers and public anger in order for this to change. The system should be such that common sense prevails in the first place. I mean, that is an insult to victims of crime that these men were defending their property. Staggering, staggering. Front porch. At least our justice system ain't as bad as the United Arab Emirates. A guy got 25 years in Dubai for. Yeah, I remember reading about that case. A tiny trace of cannabis on the bottom of his shoe, invisible to the naked eye, that he obviously didn't know about. Yeah, I actually signed a petition to get him freed. Whether I haven't followed up on that case. I don't get the Gulf states because their laws are very vague. They're actually more lenient than Saudi Arabia in some areas. They're quite easygoing in some areas, yet sometimes you just get draconian. It's kind of inconsistent. And again, I think corruption is at play. But they should remember, they rely on Western tourism. And that young guy, I mean, as you say, it wasn't even like, I mean, I personally think if you're in that part of the world or any country that's known for a hard line on drugs, you need to be super careful. But as you say, RJ, it was a trace on the bottom of his shoe. I think actually had a little vial thing that wasn't even his. I mean, definitely that should be a case where leniency is shown. It's just, I wonder sometimes do they do it to kind of as a statement because most likely he eventually got a reprieve. I imagine because we're politically close to the Gulf states, that helps. But yeah, that was outrageous. I remember that case. But like I say, it's the rules are not consistent because I know that in the Gulf states they also have. I'm not saying alcohol's legal, but they're quite relaxed about some other things. It's strange, very strange. Aaron, it sticks in my mind because attempted burglar was in the middle of the night and attacked a household and his son during burglary. I mean, that's crazy. Nighttime, these guys don't know if the burglars are armed or not. It's as for the police who process that, I know they're probably doing their job, but this is why the public are losing confidence in the police. I honestly think West Midlands Police, if it was the case, they would have had to act on those burglars making a formal complaint. Now, quite frankly, I think the police officers should have said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what you said." Basically, ignore their complaints because common sense should prevail. I mean, the police do themselves no favors sometimes, and neither do judges. So we have this situation right now where there's massive disillusion. There's the public, the police, the legal establishment, criminals. Now, the public, the police, and the legal establishment should be on the same side, but they're not. That's the problem. France does have an issue with antisocial behaviour. Go to the Council estates in Marseille and Paris, no different to the UK. Yeah, I would say that's true. I concede that. What I was driving at though is well, yeah, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I mean, I remember I traveled quite a lot around continental Europe when I was younger, and it tends to be the crime there is more traditional crime. That is theft, murder, that sort of thing. And I imagine that there was a specific problem with youth delinquency in the UK, but I could see them maybe wrong about that because it's definitely you're right, RJ. In France, the notorious banlieues of Paris, where the urban riots broke out, they tend to be often it's gangs of North African youths. That's an issue in France. It's maybe politically incorrect to say that, but there is an issue there. Let's see. It'll be interesting to see what's going on in Sweden, why there's been a rise in violent crime there. Apparently now Sweden's the gun capital of Europe, the gun crime capital of Europe after Croatia. So much for being a liberal paradise. You should defend your house at least with a baseball bat and get credit from the law, not the householder getting arrested for defending your house with a weapon. Yeah, I totally agree, Ray. Quite frankly, if someone breaks into my house, I'm not vulnerable, but I live alone. I have some blunt instruments around here, and frankly, I've often went through my mind. I mean, this is a safe area; it's highly unlikely to happen. But my neighbours did have some problems with theft last year. I've often thought, if this happens, I will take the consequences because the public will be on my side. I have bottles in here. I've got blunt objects. I don't have a bat, but there's definitely things I could use, and I would. I'd be careful about it. I probably wouldn't hit them on the head because if they got a concussion or something, it would be. What I do is I'd aim at their legs. I'm not trying to sound like Rambo here. I've seriously considered this. I've seriously considered living on my own. I need to be assertive. Um, I've done a bit of boxing. I think I could probably handle myself, but I'm not bigging myself up. I'm not, I'd be scared. I would, because you don't know what the situation is. You don't know if someone invading your house is armed or not. So I think the law should absolutely reflect that, and the law is an ass. It's a disgrace right now. Okay, people, my battery's running low, so I'm probably going to have to round this one up soon because my I do have a plug in my room, but it's darker in there. I think it's been a good session, though. Let's give it 2 more minutes because the lighting is dim because of the battery. I went to Stockholm a few months ago for a city break. Very cultured and beautiful city, but there are areas away from the centre that are well hidden from the tourists that are having serious issues. That's often the case. I mean, this is almost a universal issue. I imagine if you go to Bogota, Colombia, the city centre is fine. Mexico City, I mean, we hear about the violence in Mexico from the drug wars. Apparently, Mexico City itself is relatively safe. Often you find the city centre. Glasgow in the UK used to have a notorious reputation, but go to Glasgow, it looks like any other cosmopolitan city. So often it is the outer neighbourhoods. That's certainly true of Paris. It's always best to be prepared and not to ever have to use it. Yeah, I think some people are naive. They sort of think crime can't happen, but there's some real shitbags out there, quite frankly. Um, yeah, thanks, Declan. Do I hope they plead guilty? Just I know it means a more lenient sentence, but just for your sake, so that it's not prolonged. Because the problem is, if they plead not guilty, it just gets drawn out. Yeah, thank you, Tara. Thanks for your contribution. Think it was a good stream. I think this one went well. This is what I like to do. Like to interact with my subscribers, and just thank you all for support the channel, because I know it's not the flashiest channel. I'm just talking, but I really, really do appreciate your feedback, your participation, and your viewership. Thanks a lot, and I hope you all have a great day. Tara, I imagine it's the early hours of the morning there, so yeah, have a good rest, and everyone have a good evening. Thank you. Until next time.